Eritrea is currently going through a major hunger crisis. There was a transportation ban put in place by the regime as a response to COVID-19, but that has worsened into a food and water crisis that was already devastating the nation. So the markets are almost empty with supplies, and people can barely afford the little food that ceases to exist at the moment. Everyone back home is calling saying, we're hungry. And Eritrean regime officials like to frame the situation and say that, oh, it's just another poor African nation, we're just doing our best, but that's not the case. In fact, what they're doing is enacting these policies and withholding resources for the sole intention to hurt the Eritrean people. So in Eritrea, you can buy food from government shops, privately owned shops, or through trade, like with domestic or foreign markets. So with the government shops is that every family has like a coupon, and that coupon specifies how many people live in your house, and then it determines how many basic food supplies you get based on the number of people in your household. And then these allowances per family depend also on what area you live in. And then these coupons actually have a dual function. So the regime forces families to like constantly prove how many members are in your household to make sure that you're, first of all, not buying more food than you're entitled to. And then with doing that, it's almost like a system. This system it's used as a means of like controlling people, right? So they're always keeping track of how many people are in your house. So the regime also uses this as a way to track how many people have fled from your household, right? And as a result, if they've determined that based on these coupons that people have left from your household, then the family left behind will then get punished. And these government shops always have a food shortage because the government they just don't import enough food, right? So with the ban of transportation, the already little supply has decreased drastically. So the lack of food in these shops is a deliberate political decision by the regime. Next up is the private shops. So the government-owned shops don't have all the necessary supplies that every household needs. So that means that everyone is still required to go to privately owned shops as well. And then these shops haven't been able to import any food from like domestic farmers due to the transportation ban. And then they could not import any food from neighboring countries either because there's a lot of hostile relations or restrictions for cross-border movements, and it's not allowed. So as a result, local private shops are only selling what they have left in storage, which isn't much. Lastly, many communities depend on trading with like domestic and foreign markets. So many travel to like other villages and cities to sell what they have harvested and buy what they need. But under these strict lockdown rules, they can't do so anymore. This practice was already under threat as the government regularly would take what people harvest and sell it for a higher price in their stores. And then the border communities are also dependent on trade with Sudan and Yemen. So the hunger crisis on the coast is currently extreme because their closest trading partners in Ethiopia, Djibouti, and across the Red Sea in Yemen are beyond the traders' reach because of the government's conflicts with the neighboring countries and restrictions on transportation. So next is that the food is just too expensive, right? So the very little food that exists has always been expensive. However, because of the current shortages, these prices have just skyrocketed, right? So the main issue is that the purchasing power of the Eritrean currency, which is the nakfa, has plummeted, right? So in 2016, the Eritrean regime announced that they were going to be changing the currency. So they demanded that everyone bring in their old money to the bank and exchange it for this new currency. So Eritreans had to explain how they got the money that they were going to be exchanging, right? So some citizens had, a large amount of legitimate money, but either they were just unable to explain it or they were afraid that the authorities were not going to accept their explanation. But the powerful, those who were in power, those who had connections, had no problem exchanging their money, no matter how large or if their reasoning was illegitimate. So after depositing all their money, they were only allowed to withdraw 5,000 nakfa per month, which is equivalent to $357.1 US. So before the currency change, $1 US was 45.1 nakfa, and after the currency change, $1 US became 14 nakfa. So the currency depreciated by 70%. The regime has fixed the currency so that it has not changed since 2016, and despite the drop in the value of the currency, the prices, including the food prices, have not decreased to reflect the devalued currency. 60% of the population are a part of the mandatory national service, and their monthly salary is approximately 500 nakfa, which is equivalent to $37 or less. This salary is meant to support the conscripts and their entire families as well. And because of the coronavirus pandemic, the regime is only paying the conscripts half of their salary, which is 250 nakfa, equivalent to $18.5. They are saying they need to save the other half to fight the virus. How will a family dependent on this salary afford to buy any food when the prices are this expensive? So an example of some of the food prices in Eritrea include berbere, which is the chili powder that's used in most Eritrean dishes, and it's currently 300 nakfa, which is equivalent to $21.4 per kilogram. Coffee, which is currently 110 nakfa, and that's equivalent to $7.85 per kilogram, and sugar, which is currently 50 nakfa, and that's equivalent to $3.5 per kilogram. And yeah, there was even this UN special reporter on Eritrea talking about this hunger crisis, proving that there was recent reports that indicated a lot of disadvantages in the population in and around like Massawa, Assab, and in the regions bordering like Ethiopia and Sudan, and that they've been suffering severe food shortages. So next, the people in Eritrea have no money, right? So as I was just explaining, that the salaries of majority of the population are very, very low, and many citizens have no salary, or they're just one of the paid conscripts from the national service. But small businesses are also suffering, right? Many people, these small businesses are being required to pay their full rent on top of paying their workers their regular salary without any type of support from the government. So most Eritreans depend on support from their family members abroad. So since the regime's response to COVID-19 began, the public has faced massive obstacles in order to access this money that we're sending them. They've been asked to wait for hours and hours in line just to be shooed away and asked to come back another day. And due to the transportation ban, not everybody lives in the capital city of Asmara, right? So people have to travel for long distances. They have to walk to collect their money, and then people are living relatively close. They might sleep on the floor in line so that they don't miss their spot, right? And family members abroad are sending cargo loads filled with food and supplies to Eritrea, but many of these have been reportedly intercepted by the regime with, no explanation. So number 4 is that the regime is hiding the money that was raised from the diaspora to fight COVID-19, right? So in March, the Eritrean diaspora was encouraged by like embassies and the regime officials to raise funds to help fight COVID-19 in Eritrea. So according to the Eritrean Minister of Information, $2.7 million was raised in the US alone, but there were no records of how much money was raised worldwide. Many Eritreans wanted to, do their share, but they don't want to donate money because they just simply don't trust the regime. So the regime has still not reported how this money has been used. According to Radio Arena, which is like an independent radio station which is based in Paris, the money was collected from each country and was sent to these bank accounts in Russia, and they were never sent to Eritrea. So a few years ago, Western countries started clamping down on the regime's practice that they were forcing members of the diaspora to pay 2% of their salary. So in fear of sanctions and their accounts getting frozen, the regime started stashing away funds in countries where they can more freely move it, for example like Russia, Egypt, and China. How can we help, right? So there are a couple immediate support ways that we can help in this moment. The first would be to just donate directly to your family members in Eritrea. I know that there are fears that your money may be intercepted, or that the money that you send may not be enough. However, in this moment, there's not much that we can do directly, so any little thing counts. Second would be to send non-perishable foods to your relatives or family members or strangers, whatever, to Eritrea. You can send any type of non-perishable food, or you can send any supplies that they might need in cargo there. So that could definitely help them in this situation. And then a way for long-term support and immediate support would be to just constantly apply pressure on the Eritrean regime, right, to implement these changes that we are demanding. Some of these changes would be to relax the ban on transportation, to import more food, to end the water shortage, to stop fixing the currency, and to also pay the conscripts a livable wage. Signed the petitions in our bio, and those are demanding what I have just explained. Things that you can also do: you can organize demonstrations, you can organize protests in your city, be loud, use social media. We really want our voices to be heard. And of course, that if you have any alternative ways or alternative methods that you may know or have, share them with us. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear all the feedback and ways that we can constantly apply this pressure in these difficult times so that we can better assist our people.